Welcome to the Get Unhooked podcast with Jason Coombs, where experience meets insight. Jason Coombs, nationally recognized speaker, best-selling author, and founder of Brickhouse Recovery, shares hard-earned lessons on resilience, leadership, addiction, and mental health. No filters, no fluff, just real stories, practical wisdom, and a deeper look at what it takes to grow, lead, and keep moving forward. Now here's your host, Jason Coombs.
Today is a special day for me as I am celebrating the 1-year anniversary of my hero and my best friend's passing, my dad. And so today I've done a lot of reflection and today I feel grateful for the times that he battled for me on my behalf against my addiction. I'm incredibly grateful for his commitment to getting off the beach and for his commitment to live unhooked by showing me and showing my family members how to take care of himself and to be in a place where he was in a position to lift me up. He modeled what emotional sobriety looked like. And so today I honor him and I'm so grateful for him. Today I was thinking about some of the questions that I got this week from family members who are trying to help their addicted loved one. And that it was an interesting angle to consider. My friend published a book called The Inner Critic, Silencing the Inner Critic. And as she and I were talking through her experience, which I'll let her tell her story because I want to be mindful of not, misspeaking. But let's just say that she could relate to all of you in a very real way. And what came up for her was her version of the addict voice. I call it the addict voice. She calls it the inner critic. I think that is a perfect description for those of you who are supporting your addicted loved one and continually face that voice. It's that voice that we can be a slave to. I think about when I first attempted getting into a cold bath, that inner voice, the inner critic, started to scream at me, telling me I can't, I'm not strong enough. I noticed that inner addict voice or inner critic flared up as I was doing the Ironman race, which I actually completed it in 7 hours and 16 minutes, which was a lot faster than I anticipated. And I'm still alive to talk about it. But I got to tell you how often the addict voice or inner critic showed up throughout the entire experience. And as we can relate to those in addiction that are slaves to this voice, we can begin to separate or continue to separate our addicted loved one from the disease. And so chapter 7 in Unhooked is dedicated to a vignette that highlights an experience that I had describing what that inner voice, that inner critic sounds like, and how loud it was, and how much I obeyed it, and how I would argue with it. But he was patient. So even if I felt like I was able to silence that voice for a small window of time, he would try again through a different approach. And it might have been a softer approach, but it was cunning and it was manipulative and it was believable. It was so believable that I didn't really know the difference between what were my thoughts and what were the inner critic. And so as we look at chapter 7, this chapter describes what it was like when I had an experience with my mom. And this was the times that she would reach out and she would try to help me in any way she could. So sometimes she would drop off little notes with chips and salsa or clean socks or clean underwear and just leave them at the door where I was staying. And she would leave me a note and she would say, I love you, son. Love, mom. And I just thought that that was so beautiful that she would love me twice in every note. The experience that I highlight in this chapter is the times that she would invite me to lunch, and I talk about this one experience of the back and forth that I had with my inner critic or the addict voice. And so this I liken to, if you've seen Lord of the Rings, there is a character in Lord of the Rings named Gollum and Smeagol, and Gollum is the addict voice, and Smeagol is the other voice, or the real version of the character. And I view the addict voice as one that was always propelling me forward. My inner Jason, like the little boy inside me, or the sunlight of the spirit, the still small voice of conscience, of light that was leading me along, was much more subtle. The addict voice was demanding and would justify and reason with me to minimize, to justify, to spiritualize, to find ways to make the problem or the decision to lie or to use seem like it was a good idea, or that people would be better off if I was not in their life. And so a lot of the relationships, I would intentionally sabotage or burn because I would follow that voice. And when I think about the times that I would hear this voice, it's almost like a committee up in my brain. And to hear them argue is mental interference. And I think that this is exacerbated with people that have anxiety disorder as well as ADHD. And I don't have bipolar disorder, but I've seen it exacerbated with those that do. They go manic, and it's very difficult to navigate these voices. You almost wonder if there's a level of schizophrenia. I actually have a client right now, and without breaking any confidentiality, I'll just keep it at that has schizophrenia as well as substance use disorder. And it's been very interesting to help him keep that in remission while he is keeping his substance use disorder in remission. But how much that inner critic reminds him that he's not good enough, that he's broken, that he's never going to change because of this terminal uniqueness, that he's got this diagnosis that nobody else in group has. And so, it's this inner critic is always reminding him that he's not going to be successful. And so how do you help someone that has this inner critic? How do you help silence that? I'm sure that there are efforts and attempts that have been made by you and by my parents that are well intended, which can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes my parents would send me motivational talks or talks from our church leaders, or would give quotes to me, or just from their own thoughts, tell me essentially why I shouldn't believe those voices, even though I wasn't describing what those voices were to them. But it's kind of like, you have more potential than this, you can do better than this. And although I appreciate the effort, I think that there might be a better way. And this, again, is my opinion based in my experience. But one of the ways that I help silence the inner critic in others is to first work on silencing my inner critic. And so it's interesting that when I have someone that I'm trying to influence who's sitting across the couch from me or across the room from me, and we're knee to knee, and I'm helping them with their addiction and their their baggage. Oftentimes, as they're describing how they view themselves, I can tell the areas that they're believing the inner critic, the shame comments that they put themselves down. They talk negatively about themselves. So what I do is I will share with them a personal experience that I have that helps quiet that voice and helps draw awareness to discern that there is a difference between the addict voice and the real Jason, or the Gollum versus the Smeagol, or the inner critic versus the inner champion. As I lean into that, I share this personal experience, and I say, I want first, may I ask you if I have permission to share a couple of thoughts that I have based on the things that you've been saying. Are you open hearing what I have to say? If they're not open, then why would I waste my breath? That would be imposing ideas on them. And I'm not in the business of imposing ideas anymore, because I realize that it just creates more resistance. I do think there is a place, though, for seed planting, even if they don't give permission. So let me just put that out there. I think there is a place for seed planting and inserting ideas that need to be inserted, at least gently or firmly, depending on how well our trust and rapport is going. So I think that's a good gauge. But when we think about presenting our experience to someone else, I ask for permission, and then I say, so I want to just touch on a couple of things that I picked up on as you were talking. And keep in mind, we're not even talking about the addict voice. We're not even talking about, the topic isn't, I have these voices and these thoughts in my head. It might be talking about work. It might be talking about their schedule at work. It might be talking about something they're working on in the curriculum, or their ambivalence about something else. But what I do is I'm picking up on some of the beliefs that they are buying into, that I know come from the addict voice, because I can discern it. It's not uplifting. It doesn't represent self-love or self-care or self-appreciation or gratitude. It's the opposite of that. It's self-condemnation or self-pity or self-hatred or negative thinking. So I pick up on that. And then I will share the story of how one time I was talking to one of my mentors, and I was describing my situation to him. I don't even remember exactly what we were talking about, but it did relate to speaking in public. I know that it was related to that because of the venue that we were at. And I was about a year sober at the time. And as I was sharing with him, he stopped me and he said, Jason, can I just ask you something as your brother, as your friend? And I was like, yeah. He said, if I talk to you the way you talk to yourself, would we be friends? I had to think about that for a second. If he talked to me the way the addict voice talks to me, would we be friends? If someone talked to me the way the inner critic talks to me, would I listen, or would I cut them out of my life and avoid them? I said, you don't have to answer that. And I said, no, I will. If you talk to me the way I talk to myself, I think we'd probably fight, and we would probably get in a fight. And he said, exactly. So why do you give yourself permission to talk to yourself that way? Just something to think about. It's like, that is powerful. I mean, that's it. Really interesting. Now, I was also in a place to receive it. It was, I think the timing was great. The trust and rapport was there. So I'll share that story with my client, and then I'll share. So what I began to do was I learned this word called genshai, and it's spelled Genshai. The etymology of the word is more meaningful than this, but it's a Hindu word that means never treat anyone in a manner that would make them feel small, including yourself. And so to practice genshai means I watch what I say about others, to others, and even more so about me, to me. And that awareness began a journey for me of becoming a genshai practitioner. How I started this was I decided that I was going to put a post-it note on my mirror that says, love myself with a compliment today. And the idea is to remind myself to shut off the inner critic when I'm looking at my love handles, for example, or I'm looking at other areas that I'm critiquing about my body or my face or whatever. And that narrative that follows when I am beating myself up. And you think about, if I talked to my kids that way, that is verbal abuse. It's emotional abuse. The things I say to myself, and if I can think about the little boy inside me that has been beaten down by me, verbally, emotionally, physically, in every form, start to think about the impact of how I talk to myself and what it's doing to strengthen my natural man and ego with self-hatred, or strengthen my little boy inside, my spiritual man. And so I think that as I share this experience with them, and I talk about looking at myself in my own two eyes in the mirror and saying something to myself that I can believe. This isn't about me stroking my ego, or it's really about learning the practice of looking at myself and saying some affirmations. And I know affirmations work. I know that affirmations work. And as I would do that, at first it's so weird. It's so awkward. But you know what started to happen? Besides the fact that it got easier to say those things to myself because I became more believable, what I noticed is that I wasn't expecting this, but I started to feed myself better nutrition, to take care of myself better by going to bed earlier, and I started to sleep better. I started to fuel my body with healthier things. My self-talk, when it was negative, I noticed it. That's huge. I noticed it. And then I would do a spot check inventory, a little step 10, and I would ask God to remove that character defect from me. And he would, one day at a time. And so as this inner critic was coming up on during my Ironman race, and since, by the way, the inner critic continues, like, you're a fraud, you're a fake, you're a phony, you're not a real, athlete, blah, blah, blah. And on the other hand, it's like the inner critic can puff you up to feel like you're the man, or you're a big deal or whatever. And I think that both ends of those are dangerous if you're not aware of them. And as I became aware of them, I prayed a lot throughout the race, and the prayers were in the forms of affirmations and in the forms of remove these thoughts from me and give me strength. They weren't prayers of, I guess they weren't prayers that didn't have meaning. Like, they had meaning because I was calling upon strength and power. Another thing that I noticed too is my inner critic would silence when I would just say, good job, to someone that was passing me. Say, good job, you got this. You're doing awesome. Well done. Like, I constantly found myself trying to boost others with positive words. Yes, I wanted them to do well and I wanted to pour into them, but ultimately what I was trying to do was survive. And as I did that, I found power. I found my inner strength. I found the inner champion coming out versus the negative self-talk. And I noticed like how tired and exhausted I'd be when I would let my negative self-talk keep going. And I think that that's analogous to life, and it's analogous to our trials. And so when we feel we're in a rut on any given day, I want to work on becoming aware of what the inner critic or the addict voice is saying and separating the two between the real you and the critic, and then replacing those thoughts with genshai. Become a genshai practitioner and treat yourself and others in a manner that makes them feel worth, makes them feel love, that does not make them feel small in any way. And reach out to yourself, the inner version of yourself, in the mirror by putting a little Post-it note or something, a little affirmation. I actually have a sticker of Genshai on my mirror, and I have it on my kids' mirror because I want them to grow up thinking Genshai. I don't want them to grow up thinking negative thoughts about themselves. And we'll see if that works. Well, that experiment is yet to be done, but the hypothesis is, I think, positive. And then lastly is to find ways to lift others by saying your version of good job, you got this, or expressing gratitude to those that have helped you along the way, telling them something that you see in them that you honor. And what's cool is, going back to the conversation I'm having with my client, we've moved away from the topic that we were originally talking about. Of course, if it's an important topic, we'll go back to it. But there was a moment in there where I was able to help infuse them with some very important recovery and very important imagery and important distinctions between the addiction and who they really are fighting for, and separating the two. And if that process can happen, what I find is that they almost drum up their own reasons to change, because now it's a challenge. It's a battle. Like, I'm suiting up for the battle, and I'm going to. So that's one of the reasons I do cold plunges. It's because I know that inner voice that critic is going to show up every time. And I'm able to just shut him down. And I'm able to tell him, nope, not today. Sometimes he wins. Where maybe don't, go out on that run, or don't go eat something healthy, or don't go to bed on time, or whatever the case might be. But I'm okay, because the fence is set up far away from the cliff's edge. And if I have those many setbacks, those are not as egregious as if I were dancing along the cliff's edge. And so identify what it is in your life that your inner voice, inner critic shows up, your addict voice. And what does she say? What does he say? What are the things that you can do that will challenge you, when you step out of your comfort zone, you become even more and more aware of that voice. And in those moments, I just want you to be mindful and to consider what and who and how that has controlled your life and has created havoc for you, or has stopped you from realizing your own dreams. And that points you to your work, points you to where to spend time, and how to shut off the dark is you go into flip on the light. And the more light you shine, the dark dissipates, it dispels. And I do believe that. I do believe that with negative thoughts and character defects, is that if we can shine light on those, we identify those, and then, they dispel if we're willing to ask for help from a higher power to remove those. And the more I am willing to do that, the more I find I change for the better. And I'm grateful for the process, because this framework really does work. And it has been working for a long time for me. I appreciate you taking the time to dive into this particular area and section of the book, because as I said in the beginning, the more aware we can be of what someone else is experiencing, the more empathy we can have, and the more influence that we can have on them by helping them see these things, these nuances that they might be blind to. So with that, I'd like to say thank you.
I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this show. Thank you for your support. Thank you for sharing these episodes so that they can help others. This is one way that you can give back and pay it forward, is by just passing along this free information to others that are possibly in need. Share it on social media, share it with your loved ones and family members. And don't forget, you can access my book on Audible, as well as on Amazon or on my website, as well as you can find information about our services at Brickhouse Recovery at brickhouserecovery.com.